Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out on this cold evening for the latest Housing Scrutiny Committee meeting. So the usual introduction, this is a meeting of the Council held in public. It's not a public meeting. There is no fire drill planned, so if the fire alarm sounds, please leave by the exit nearest the large screen at the front of the room and proceed down the fire exit to the courtyard. Once it's safe to return, councillors will receive a text message. Officers will also advise when it is safe to return to the meeting. We're recording this meeting this evening using our webcasting system. The webcast will be transmitted live and will also be available on the council's website following the meeting. All mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so the meeting is not interrupted by ringtones. Thank you. Okay, so item number 1 is apologies for absence, but I think we're all present. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest from the members? The usual, what's that? So, Essex County Council, yeah. Sorry, is that what you mean by the usual one? Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, item number 3 is confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 24th of September 2025. So those in favour of the minutes, please show. Okay, any abstentions? Yeah, okay. Is that okay, Suzanne? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so on to the body of the meeting then. So the first item for presentation is item 4 on the agenda, which is pages 15 to 19, tenancy fraud update, and I believe that Mike Porter is going to be presenting this on behalf of the officers. So over to you, Mike.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have to make a small confession to start with. I spotted a couple of minor errors to report. It says it covers the period from April to September. That should read April to November. As this meeting got pushed back, I updated some of the figures in the tables, but I obviously forgot to change the wording. And on page 17, the second table says 2024-25. It should read 25-26. But apart from that, the report stands. So the counter-fraud team itself plays a vital role in protecting social housing stock and public funds. Our focus remains on detecting and preventing tenancy fraud, in line with the Prevention of Social Housing Fraud Act 2013 and the Fraud Act 2006. The two really important figures to me are the number of properties recovered and the number of housing applications cancelled. These actions preserve the housing for those in genuine need and demonstrate our zero-tolerance approach to fraud. So far in 25-26, our proactive fraud prevention work has generated over 2.5 million in non-cashable savings and approximately 15,000 in cashable savings. This clearly demonstrates the significant impact and value of our efforts. I'm quite happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mike. Any questions from the members of the committee? No? Any questions from the Vice Chair? No? Okay. I've got a few questions myself, so if I can just go into those. Firstly, could you just give us a brief overview of cashable and non-cashable savings? I think I understand it, but I'm sure you could explain it better than I can read it. Thank you.
Yeah, the report does actually outline the difference. In terms of cash, that's real cash. It's money you get back. So you may issue a debtor's invoice, so it's money you get that returned to the council. So it's real physical cash that comes into the council. Non-cashable savings, as it says, it refers to costs avoided or resources preserved due to fraud, prevention or detection, but does not result in any direct financial gain or cash recovery. So we're not getting money back from people that have been overpaid benefits. What happens is basically we're deferring costs. It's in regards to right to buy applications, there's a discount you can obtain for right to buy applications. So if we prevent a right to buy application going through, that discount's not paid out. And also if we look at temporary accommodation, there's costs associated with putting someone into temporary accommodation. So if we get property back and can pass that property on to someone in need, we again don't pay out temporary accommodation costs. So that's where we say non-cashable. We do magic formulas, we put a guess on it. So basically a number of authorities have their own sort of magic formulas in terms of what they relate to cashable savings, non-cashable savings, but that's an estimate of what we can cost saved in a way, not paid out, rather than actually money coming back to the council.
Thank you very much for that clarification. So on the summary table on page 17 of the report, I mean, it seems clear that right to buy is the biggest gearing factor in terms of the fraud situation. So I just wanted to ask, have we made any changes to the way that we process or validate right to buy applications in view of the number of cases and the value of the cases involved?
We still look at every right to buy application. There was quite a large increase in the number of applications received. That's because the rules changed in November 2024. The previous discount available was £102,000. And then after November 2024, that came down to £38,000. So there was a mad rush or influx of applications, because if you got your application in before the 20th of November, you were entitled to the £102,000, and then after that it's obviously gone down to 38,000. So what we saw is a large increase in people putting in right to buy applications. But our process is we do look at each right to buy application, and we do actually go out and visit those individuals. So our process hasn't changed. It's just created a bit more of a headache. We've got a lot more applications to look at, but our process didn't change. No.
Okay, so you're satisfied that it's robust enough?
Yes.
To manage the level we're expecting going forward. Yes, Councillor Headley has a question. I'll pass over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. My apologies, I couldn't get my laptop to work, so I only had 20 minutes to read through the papers. Can you give us an indication of what triggers an investigation?
There's a number of triggers in a way in terms of the different types of investigations. There's whistleblowing. There's also the National Fraud Initiative work we undertake, which highlights possible indications of fraud. But also from internal departments themselves, we get managers informing us of potential fraud. And so there's an internal fraud referral form. So if someone believes fraud's being committed, they will complete an internal fraud referral form. So there's a number of avenues that will start an investigation, either internal, National Fraud Initiative work, whistleblowing, and the likes.
So if there's a suspicion of a fraud taking place, does the council have the right to do some form of surveillance of the property?
Surveillance would be the last resort, because we have to make an application to the Magistrates' Court, and it's quite a robust process. We have to basically outline why we can't use any other measure. So basic surveillance would be the last form we would undertake, but sometimes surveillance work is required, and we would have to complete an application. That would be assessed by a gatekeeper, because you have to look at collateral intrusion, other people you may observe while you're actually undertaking surveillance work. So there's a robust process. You then have to go to the Magistrates' Court and put your case, and they will choose to approve it or not to approve it.
That was the right answer, by the way. Following that up, how many cases that are investigated? I'm not sure if it's in the figures. For every 1,000 cases investigated, how many lead to
Actually, I've not quantified it in that way, so okay. I don't actually have those figures to hand.
So in terms of value for money, the cost of running the service is more than compensated by the funds that you recoup?
Yes, that's correct, okay, yes.
That's fine.
That's an initial business case for creating the counter-fraud team in the first place. We had to put forward a business case which basically put forward that, yeah, the funds we got back were more than cover actually the expenditure on staff costs, yes.
Actually, following on from that, can I just ask a question, which is are we to any extent limited in our ability to identify fraud by our officer capacity?
I think the more staff resources you put into it, the more you're likely to find. That's what I would say. So if you had more staff, you would probably find more fraud or detect more fraud. I know some of the London boroughs have 33 fraud investigators. I think it's the London Borough or Hillingdon have 33 officers. I have 4, and they do report a significant amount of savings. But yeah, I think the more resources you had, the more you could possibly find.
Okay, so I mean, in terms of the law of diminishing returns, do you think we ought to consider hiring more fraud investigators?
Yeah, it's something that I'm always asked by my assistant director, do we need more resources? And I said, yes, that would be great, but our hands are somewhat tied by the budget available.
Councillor Blake.
Surely what you just said, if it brings in more money than it turns out, then there's no budget issue at all, then, is there? I can't see how you can say it's done down to budgetary situation. If you're saying now, which you have, that we're bringing in a lot more than what we're paying out, then there can't be any budgetary things as far as I'm concerned. So it's don't see how that came about.
Yes, I mean, that would be my argument, but I'm not the decision maker. I can put forward, I'm likely to bring in more funds in, and therefore it's a no-brainer to some respect, but it's not for me to make decisions. I put forward a business case, and yeah, depending on that decision, where they want to put their expenditure, there might be other services that warrant expenditure other than counter-fraud team. So it's not for me to make that decision. I can only put forward a business case and suggest, yes, we should have more staff, but if other services or other areas warrant that expenditure rather than the counter-fraud team, it's not for me to make that decision.
Do you have a follow-up question, Councillor Blake? I don't get that, if I'm being honest with you. Other areas might want more people, and I get that, but they're not going to bring in an additional income. You know, when you're looking at something, it's smacking you in the face that says, you give me 10 people and I'll bring in an extra £1 million into you. The business case is just, I just don't understand the answer, if I'm being honest. So nor do you. I can tell you.
I would be more than happy to have more staff.
I think what I would say, thank you, by the way, for your candid answer to that question. I know it's not the easiest question to answer, but could we request that someone come back to one of our future meetings, for example, end of February, with some kind of analysis of how the correlation between number of staff and likely returns is going to look? Because I think, it sounds like that might be, a potentially fruitful area for the council.
I mean, we have done some minor analysis in terms of looking at London Borough and Hillingdon. If you look at it, cost or recovery cost per counter-fraud member of staff, we're higher than Hillingdon. So you could argue that actually 33 staff is probably not the way to go. So if you look at it on savings or return per member of staff, we are higher than Hillingdon because we only have 4 members of staff. I think they're reporting around 5 or 6 million, and they've got 33 members of staff. So if you look at it in terms of return per head or per member of staff, we're outperforming Hillingdon, who have 33. So you may say, actually, we don't need 33, and therefore we'll stick to 4 people. So based on the simple analysis and that analysis, we are outperforming a larger team.
Thank you for that. Sorry, just before we come to Councillor Headley did raise this. Oh, yes, by all means then, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we also look at the number of properties that we are looking at and the size that we are compared to those other London boroughs that we are being compared to right now. I think it's also important that, I'm sure the report does highlight somewhere the memorandum of understanding that we have, where we can tap into other London boroughs and their financial investigators. And we do that in order to top up and in order to do, when we feel that there is more investigation to be done and we don't have the resources, we do have that memorandum of understanding. And I think that is important to note.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chairman. The report in the background notes indicates that you investigate all types of fraud with the exception of housing benefit fraud, which is handled by the Department of Works and Pensions. So how closely is your department working with the DWP to ensure, I have no evidence, but I suspect that someone perpetrating housing benefit fraud might also have some nefarious activity going on with your area.
Yeah, we do undertake joint investigations. The DWP would lead on it where there's housing benefit involved, and given they actually are based in this building, the synergies we work quite closely alongside them if and when required to do so, yes.
Okay, I mean, just to close that off, I would still like to look at a bit of analysis to understand what the pros and cons are there. So if that's possible, perhaps you could minute that and consider it. Suzanne, thank you. My last question on this one, if there's no further questions from the floor, is to what extent or how do we publicise to applicants and potential tenants the consequences of housing fraud?
I've created a page on our website which highlights the work of the counter fraud team, and it talks about whistleblowing and it talks about the work we do, because we're now looking at social media as a form of investigation tool. So we're highlighting all the work we do because social media is now identified as a potential area to look at, because people post things. You know, they don't think about what they post, but we do look at social media posts. So, yeah, as I say, I have a counter fraud page and the work of the counter fraud team and all the work we do and all the issues, and also any application that someone completes a housing application, it talks about the potential for fraud and what would happen if fraud is identified. So it's signposted basically on the counter fraud webpage, and also in applications that people complete. It talks about fraud. It also talks about NFI. It talks about data sharing and things like that. So each application contains a note about data sharing, because we do a lot of data sharing. It's a national exercise which happens every 2 years. So people are made aware of the fact that the data is being used as part of the National Fraud Initiative, and if we uncover fraud, we will investigate.
Okay, I mean, silly question maybe, but do you think that the visibility of the warnings to someone making a right to buy application that potentially might be fraudulent are strong enough? Because it feels to me like, you know, and I appreciate what you said about the number of applications we had to meet a particular timing threshold, but you know, if we've had the thick end of £3 million worth of non-cashable savings on that subject, it feels to me like it really needs to be hitting people between the eyes that you know, what the implications of a fraudulent application would be.
I think we could always do more on comms work. We have struggled in the past with the comms team itself, but I think we could do more to advertise the work and highlight, like, yeah, I think we could do more in that area, yes.
Thank you. I'd appreciate you looking at that then. So any further questions from the members on item 4, tenancy fraud update? No? Okay, so we'll move on now to item number 5, which is the AWAB's law presentation, which is a separate PowerPoint, I think, not in the agenda. And I think that John is going to present that particular item. Yeah.
It's going to come up on screen now. Okay, I will run through this quickly, but do stop if you have any questions. Obviously, damp and mould is something which can kill, as we all know, and we have taken on a zero tolerance policy, because we should, but also because the law requires us to now. It's AWAB's law. It's for all social landlords. All damp and mould problems should be fixed fast. And well, you can read, but yet we have timeframes that we have to adhere to. It was named after the young lad in, I think it was Rochdale, was it, who tragically died in his home. It's a lung condition linked to mould in his council home, and the tragic thing is his family did report the mould, but nothing was done, and that's something we never want to repeat. So there are key deadlines that we need to meet as a repair service, and obviously we're going through a bit of a transition, but we are working hard on this. You can see them there. It's also a time of year where we do get a lot of damp and mould reported, as you can imagine. Obviously this... Sorry, can I just ask a quick question? Yeah, of course.
So I was just, in terms of the timing cadence there, how... Oh, yes, sorry, John, could you just turn your mic off?
Apologies.
Thank you. So in terms of those timings there, how do we identify whether a situation is an emergency situation within 24 hours, or are they all considered emergency situations if they're mould related?
It's up to the reporting. You know, obviously, if something's an emergency, we'll know quite quickly. The training of the call handlers will make it clear. When we say emergency, we mean something which is obviously immediately needs looking at. Under the KPIs and the Morgan Sindall contract, that was within 2 hours. But actually, under this law, we've got another 22 hours to do it, which seems a bit perverse actually. But so things like if you've got water gushing through your flat, then we go and turn the water off. We don't fix it, but we sort the situation. Same with electrics. If there's gas leak, well, don't call us, call the gas board. But yeah, it's things which are an immediate danger to life. So in terms of damp and mould, there's not too many situations I would say was necessarily an emergency. But if someone reported, you know, a lot of black mould which was seriously bad, that hadn't been looked at for years, we would have to move them out immediately. So that would be an emergency in this situation.
Thank you. I think Councillor Brockman, you had a question.
Yeah, Chair, just a point. If the gentleman could put his microphone near his mouth, the rest of us might be able to hear what he's saying. All right, it's very hard to hear. Thank you.
Mic check. Okay, next slide, please. Also, this is going out to residents, and it went to our Housing Improvement Board, so we need to let people know how to. There will be a section on comms later in the agenda.
Thanks. Can I just ask a quick question on that one? Is there any instruction that's gone to tenants about how to flag that a complaint is about AWAB's law? Because I guess if these are all coming in with you know, all categories of complaint, it might be difficult to identify an emergency one that we would need to respond on immediately.
Yeah, look, we've looked at our procedures around this and how we tag calls and repairs, etc. And we've had to respond, so we do know if it is damp or mould, and that will start the clock ticking. We've got changes in systems, basically, which allowed us to do this. Obviously, going forward, when we're changing how we're doing repairs, we'll have to take that into account. And we're getting a new asset management system, which will change how we work quite considerably. But yeah, it's an evolving process, basically.
So is there a checkbox on the form that you fill out that says, yes, this is a damp and mould inquiry?
In its simplest form, yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, this is directed at tenants, this one. This is the promises we're making to the tenants. You'll see it's pretty straightforward, keeping it simple. There's not many cases necessarily where we get major works for damp and mould, but obviously, you know, 98%, this is my anecdotal figures, are probably condensation related. But where there are major works, we have to do it within 12 weeks, which is quite a different timescale to what we're used to for major works. I think as well, a big piece of this will be around education for tenants, because as I mentioned, if it is condensation, if you leave it, you know you will get black mould. Any sort of water, vapour from your body, from cooking, from washing, it needs to go somewhere. You know, some of this is our fault because our rooms aren't necessarily well ventilated. But also, if people don't turn on their heating in winter, you're going to get a lot of condensation. So there are issues around poverty, etc., which we need to sort of help with and take a different approach with.
Thank you. So I've got a question on this slide as well, which is, I assume this is going in this form to tenants as a kind of instruction or piece of communication. I was just wondering if we could make it catchier, John, because it's, I mean, a lot of the time with these kind of instructions, the first letter of each word makes a word that makes it stick in your mind, and in this particular instance, that's not the case. So you don't have to fix it now, but I think if possible, it might be worth considering whether we could come up with something that would stick in people's minds a bit better.
That's a good point, and actually we're not the only people doing this, so it's a good case of looking at who's doing it best and perhaps copying it, because Kugyu is not the catchiest, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, that was my thought.
But look, it's not just about fixing the problem, it is about checking that it stays away. And someone made the point, if you go next slide, Louise, that 6 months, if you're in the middle of winter and then you're checking in summer, it's probably not the best time to be checking when you've got damp related to cold. But it's important that we do follow up, and cards on the table, so to speak. We're not great at necessarily doing that sometimes. So yeah, we do need to follow up and support, and we are making strides in this area. I think technology's got a massive part to play in this. I mentioned our new asset management system. It will genuinely be quite transformational in how we run our service. That's hopefully going to go live August this year. But we've got already things like Switchy, which they're great on their own, but it's also how you use them, how you integrate them into your processes, and how do you, effectively use that data that's giving you to have meaningful outcomes. We've also got some extra bods on the ground. You just can't get away from that. We need more people basically, and we are getting them. But the data is telling us that we do have lots of properties which are in danger at certain times of the year of going into damp or mould territory. And the best thing and the cheapest thing for us is to catch it before it turns into damp and mould. And we haven't quite cracked how we do that yet, but you can communicate with residents through the switching unit, for example. If you're sending letters, then it gets very expensive very quickly. So we do want to stick to things like a tenant's portal, websites. And I think the new asset management system probably got a part to play, because tenant can actually go into it from a web-based version and say, actually, oh, I'm at risk here, I can see my data. So that we are evolving how we're using this data and how we can, attack these problems from a different way. You could probably go on one more. That's all I've really got to say on the matter, but obviously this is something we need to monitor going forward and bring the data to you as it evolves, because we are in month 3, I think, of our ABS law.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the floor? You have Councillor Hadley first. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Bearing in mind that a number of our estates are approaching 60, 70 years old, and some of the construction methods used back then were they didn't probably put in the right insulation, or so. Are you proactive in trying to identify properties whose construction might be less helpful in preventing this sort of defect? And have you any data on what length of exposure is necessary before a medical issue arises?
I think from the first question, yes. If you gave me £1 billion tomorrow, I could spend it in a year in terms of the estates and the work we could do. The second, no, I'm not an expert on the actual health side of things. I'd argue that any black mould is probably, you don't want to have any exposure. I think there is a part of this is down to tenant responsibility as well. If you find a little bit of black mould, it's okay to wipe it off. Of course, when it grows to a certain size and intensity, then it does get dangerous to even touch, I think. But yeah, I'm not an expert on the health side, I will admit.
So in terms of construction, where we know that some of the earlier housing estates probably wouldn't have had the same standard of modern insulation and ventilation, are we doing inspections? I mean the council.
Yeah, look, we are. We've got all our EPC data for our properties, so we know obviously the worse EPC, then the more likely you're going to get that condensation issues. We know we've got certain construction types. Like the Knights estate was one where, okay, we didn't realise until quite late in the day, but it was a rack one, for example. We've got a lot of non-trad properties still, including Hawthorne Leslie's, which are asbestos sheets, which isn't ideal. But the scale of the problem is they're all built at the same time. So, and they're all come to the end of their useful life. We do have a program of external wall insulation, for example, which is the easiest fix for a lot of problems, but then you might get sweating in the property if you're not do it properly. So yeah, look, we've got a lot of problems, but we are being proactive. We've got this Wave 3 funding, which we're putting in a lot of measures, doing hundreds a year at the moment, and we are looking at wholesale regeneration of estates going forward, which gets rid of a lot of problems quite quickly.
Similar to Craig.
Well, yes, ish.
Councillor Brown?
I mean, yeah, clearly the lack of investment and the lack of capital investment in our housing stock for the last 20, 30 years is coming back to definitely bite us right now. The revenue streams we've managed to be able to secure, whether that's Home in England or through the central government, are definitely helping. But you're right, Councillor Headley, it's a huge problem, predominantly around the fact that, as John constantly tells me, all our stock was built at the same time. I think it's important to note right now the comms programme that has accompanied this, not only informing our residents of the way in which to inform us about the mould, but also we've worked with Morgan Sindel in terms of comms around how to prevent, how to treat, what they should be looking out for, how to ventilate their homes and things like that. So a huge comms programme is also accompanying the information we're giving residents about the law and about our responsibilities, but also as tenants what they can do to ensure that it's not an issue in their homes. So it is a partnership really, and we are looking at that. Thank you.
Okay, just one last question. Oh, sorry, Councillor Webb, you had a question, didn't you? Apologies.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think the important aspect of this is throughout is to be proactive when it comes to AWAB's law. I suppose my main concern really is, are we really going back into, looking back into historical data where perhaps we've been falling down previously when it comes to reporting mould issues within the properties? Are we kind of looking back and then following up where that's necessary?
Not for most cases, no. If I'm being honest, no. Serious cases, yes, but no, we haven't been that proactive in following up historically, but we are much better now. Processes are changing, and we are. Yes, there's been a national campaign and new legislation. But I think we were ahead of the curve in many ways. We got switchy in well before anyone else did, because we realised that using that data could be, really useful. Thanks, Pete. So there's certain things we've done really well, but of course, and certain things in our favour. We know that most of our properties are in danger of it because they're all built at the same time. So I keep going on about that. But having said that, we have been doing external wall insulation for a long time. We have been trying to retrofit for quite a long time. So yeah, we swings and roundabouts. Some things we're good at, some things we can improve on, for sure.
Yeah, following on from that, I mean, I think you alluded to it previously, was we perhaps could do with more resources, really. And I think following on from that, obviously we've got, all this becomes part of the regulatory process as well going forward. So how do we fit currently within the regulatory process when it comes to AWAB's law? I fully understand we're probably ahead of the curve on this, which is good. So we have things in place already to counteract a lot, but there's still a lot that has to be done. But how would that be viewed from a regulator's point of view?
So I think we've got a couple of months of data already from, obviously, since the law came in. I think we're hitting about 75% of our timings at the moment in terms of responding in those timeframes that we put up. The issues are, it's the time of year when we get a lot of damper mould problems. Cold snaps, this week we will have a lot of damper mould flashes on our switches saying, you've got a problem here. Because if people can't afford to turn their heating on, they're going to get damper mould. So it's a cyclical thing. Yeah, it's the sort of thing where you always need a roofer after a storm, but not the rest of the year. It's the same with our surveyors. They're going to be really, really busy for the next 3 months, and then it will tail off, and then it will come back again next winter. So it's, yeah, we're doing the best we can. We know there's going to be a busy period through the year. We know this. It always happens, but we have taken on extra resource, which I think where we will become more efficient is our processes and our use of data and how we respond to things. I keep going on about this asset management system, but I do think I'm expecting a 10% improvement in efficiency through the use of data. I really am, and how we respond. So I'm quietly confident about that, and ask me in a year how it's gone, but yeah, that to me is how we get ahead of the curve.
Is that
That's
okay?
right,
Yeah, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, can I just say, this is, when I first got this cabinet brief in May, that's the thing that John really hammered. The fact that we'd been asking for data that had not been able to be provided from a system that didn't work. And I think collectively, the housing team have really looked at how can we work in a different way to ensure we have the outcomes that are best for our residents, and that culture of continuous improvement. How can we use that data then, not just collect it, but how does it impact on the service as a whole and the areas in which both Jonathan and the rest of the team here tonight are responsible for. And so it's been a long time coming, but finally it will be there. And I think it will have perhaps an even larger impact than Jonathan really realises right now, because all the team have already started thinking about ways in which that's going to impact the service they provide, not only making the jobs they do easier, but providing an insight into other areas that ultimately will be able us to focus resources in the right place, but also resolve things far quicker. So I think that it's such a shame that we've not had this tool, and I'm really glad that we've finally been able to provide it, and that the team are going to massively benefit, but more importantly, so are our tenants, massively going to benefit from the way in which we're going to collect and use this data.
Okay, I mean, on that subject, I think the slide said, John, that we've got about 6,500 switches out of about 11,000, is it? Properties. Is that because of the connection with the gas heating, or what? Is there a plan to roll out more switches, or is that not possible? I guess is the question.
Yeah, I think we've bought up to 8,000 now. It's just a case of rolling them out, because obviously you need a person to go in, install them properly, etc. Some people don't want them for whatever reason. There is a question mark over whether we can force them, but it's been easier not to at this point in time. We will keep rolling them out. We will keep analysing data, and if there's a new technology that comes out that's better, well, then we'll at some point we'll look at that and say, let's move on. But yeah, we are well ahead of the curve. I haven't heard of anyone else who's anywhere near half their stock being with these sort of data sensors. Sorry.
Thank you. So is the aim ultimately to have these installed in all properties with a gas supply?
You can actually use them on electric as well. It's not just gas, but that is the the goal. But of course, there's properties where we think we might try and knock this down in the next 5 years and start again. So it's probably not a good idea necessarily to put them in every property at the moment. And I'm not going to mention estates, but obviously we'll have ideas where over the next 5 years we might start to not invest too much if we don't get that return.
Thank you. Any further questions on that agenda item from the members before we move on? Okay, lovely. So I think the next item is item 6 in the agenda, the tenant handbook update, which I believe Councillor Brown's going to present. So that's on pages 21 to 65 of the agenda. Just before we get into your presentation, Councillor Brown, just read the matters for consideration, which is that the Housing Scrutiny Committee are to consider and provide feedback on the proposed tenant handbook. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to sort of give a brief summary of what you've already had. Obviously, for this committee, this item was originally supposed to come forward to you at the beginning of December, so we've all had this information for over the past month, so hopefully you're very familiar with what we're trying to achieve here. I think it's important that we say this isn't just some sort of document, it's a statement of how we're going to operate as a social landlord and how we see ourselves as a landlord and how that relationship is very different with those who occupy our homes as a tenant than those who occupy other forms of homes across our borough, and how we operate as a council to our residents. So this is about a very different type of relationship. Obviously, you could say, you know, is it a cosmetic exercise? Is it something you've just decided to do because it needs a quick tart-up? I'd say no. There's a lot of information in there that is now completely out of date. And therefore, there's been a huge body of work done looking at what information are we required to give, what information do our tenants require now that they didn't before, and how things have changed. And by doing that and by ensuring that we reflect that current regulatory environment and we take away out-of-date information, we remove that risk to us as a landlord, but also risk for our tenants, and also risk around trust issues with the way in which we operate as a council in terms of being a social landlord. So since that Social Housing Act of 2023, the expectations on a landlord has fundamentally changed. We had a training session on that you guys attended in order to start to understand how do we now need to operate and how do we now need to communicate with those tenants, and what are our new responsibilities in terms of being a landlord. And so the aim of the refreshed tenants handbook is to express that and show that really clearly in a transparent way that is easily understood. So the aim of this is provide something that is very clear, that's accessible, plain English. We're all, you know, in housing, I'm getting to learn more and more of their jargon. They're not as bad as the planners, but they try. So I think, you know, it's really important that it's something that everyone can access easily and can understand. And so there's been a lot of work around that, looking at the way in which language is used and the way in which it can be communicated. I think it's important to understand that the Tenants Handbook is a way of explaining that relationship between a tenant and their landlord. So it's very different to the other things that were expected as to social providers in terms of a council. So it looks at everything from repairs and maintenance, health and safety, rent, charges, antisocial behaviour, fraud, succession complaints, tenant engagement, antisocial behaviour. All of these things, it goes through and clearly states what is that relationship, what we're responsible for, what the tenant is responsible for, and how that processes can work. I think it's really important that our tenants understand what the council does and what we're responsible for. If you look at some of our complaints, we get complaints about the fact we don't clean their gutters. No, we're not responsible for your gutters. You are, as a tenant. And that kind of thing. So some of our complaints are around misunderstanding about what the council is responsible for and what isn't. And also some of that confusion is within our service as well. So there's been a lot of looking at what are we required to do, what should we be doing, what aren't we doing, but also what are we doing that we shouldn't be, so that those responsibilities are very clear, both in terms of your responsibility as a tenant and our responsibility as a social landlord. I think that it's really important that we understand that we have decided to do this digitally for some very good reasons. It's a live document, it's going to be easier to update, easier to access, but we're also aware that we don't want any digital exclusion. So we are having, in terms of paper copies and all of those kinds of things, we're looking at the moment how we're going to provide that and what that's going to look like. In order for us to come up with the best solution for that, we are working with our residents our tenants, sorry, not residents, I'll be in trouble for saying that, our tenants who are sitting on our Housing Improvement Board, for how they want their tenants, that communication with the new Tenants Handbook. What does it look like? How do they access it? How can they use it? How can they understand it? So we're working with them to determine what is the best way of providing that information for our tenants. So ultimately, it's not going to be a decision that I will make or that, you know, our head of housing will make, but it will be in a joint consultation with those who are presently sitting on that Housing Improvement Board. So it's reflective of what they think the tenants would require. I think it's also important to point out that this Tenants Handbook also is part of our regulatory readiness. We all know that we have to meet certain standards, and that this is part of that ensuring that our tenants fully understand that relationship. I just want to also point out that our tenants have been really engaged with this. At our first few meetings, we weren't intending to talk about the tenant handbook until we got it a little bit further down the line. We weren't really intending to bring it to you guys until we got it a little bit further down the line. But following the feedback we got from them and the way in which they've engaged in the changes that we've made thus far, we thought it was important to bring it before you tonight, so you can see that where we are in the process. This isn't the finished article. This is where we are at the process, so we can get some focus from you guys, some scrutiny, and to reflect where you think we're doing the right thing, where we're not, and then we can feed that back in to our residents who sit on the Housing Improvement Board when we have our next meeting, so that we remain tenant focused and remember that we're a landlord in this situation and what responsibilities we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. So just before we get into the specifics of the actual policy document, has anyone got any general questions on the summary report, or just general questions on the topic? Councillor Blake? No,
page 14 on your will help you. It's regarding the. So, what it's coming across to me, if the council have tiled and grouted your property, but they might not have done it quite as good, the grouting, the tenant is then responsible for the grouting, to re-grout it. I find that a little bit hurtful, wrong, that a tenant who had no fault with their own could be responsible to grout their own tiles. Cleaning, absolutely no, obviously, totally understand it, but I'm puzzled by that. How can they be responsible for the grouting of tiles? I'm only going by what's in the report. The report clearly says.
I can't get that page up.
Do you want to take that one?
No, it says cleaning, but it also continues in the same. It doesn't say.
Guys, sorry to interrupt the discussion, but please make sure you're using your microphones for the benefit of those watching online. Thank you. Yep, sure, Catherine.
My understanding, obviously, we can check it and get back to you, Councillor Brake. My understanding is that obviously the responsibility to regrout, I believed it was the council's, but we do need to check it. I think it's important to note that the handbook is just draft at the moment, and this is why we're bringing it, and obviously with the board as well. So anything that we notice that needs changing, obviously, you know, we welcome your feedback on that, but we can certainly go back and check that and make sure we give you a correct answer on that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Yeah, and we can check that and bring that. Thank you very much.
That's no problem. On that one, that's fine. Then we go on to page 15, and you mentioned about drain and waste pipes, which was quite interesting. I must interesting. Let me get to page 15 myself. Drain and waste pipe blockages caused by faulty pipe work. The reason why I picked this one, drains and waste pipe blockages caused by the tenant. I bring that up because I live next door to a tenant, a fantastic neighbour, and some time ago I was blocking everything. My drains were completely blocked, and I was having back up and everything like that. And I bought my house. And I thought, oh, blast! That's going to cost me a lot of money. So I asked the neighbours if they had the same problem, and they had. And it worked out that something had happened there and that had done it. So they would be responsible for cleaning that. Because what actually happened was the council came out and actually cleared it out, was cleared mine as well, and done it. So I'm a little bit puzzled by that. How do you know whose fault it is? In actual fact, some of that was caused by a council tree that had gone through the pipes. So when does it become the responsibility? How does a tenant know that it's their responsibility? Because you won't know in a situation like I just gave you, where the trunk of a tree was stopping it. So what do? They have to come in, get a specialist in, do the work, and then find out it's the council's responsibility. That seems a little bit unfair.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I mean, in that situation, usually what happens in my, my short term whilst being cabinet member for housing, is that tenants normally contact the council and say, I'm having this problem with my drains. The council then sends somebody out to look at that, and then they determine what's the cause of that. If the cause is shown to be the tenant, I don't know, flushing nappies down the toilet constantly, then they're going to be responsible for removing that blockage. If it turns out it's something structural that's a council's responsibility, then we will do that. But we're not going to know. What usually happens, Kevin, in that situation is that a tenant contacts the council and says, my drains aren't working, what are you going to do about it? Okay. And then once that diagnosis takes place, then that decision is made. Just as it would in the private sector, whether or not you have damaged the property or not.
I get that,
yeah. So it's just the same. But we're not expecting them to know.
Slightly different on that. 'Cause if I call somebody out to look at it from my side of it, I'll get a call-out charge. Are you saying that the tenants will get a call-out charge from the council if it's not the responsibility of the council, or should they? What I'm asking is that a free of charge service that the council give when a normal tenant, a private tenant, doesn't actually have? Because if I've got a problem with my drains, I call someone out at a charge and I pay that. So if you call the council, call someone out to look at your drains because you think it's the council, it's exactly what you said, Adele. Yeah. And the council come out and say it's not our responsibility, it's your responsibility. Do we charge that tenant for the call-out charge because there was a cost to the council on that?
I don't know. I don't know if any of my officers here would be able to answer that. But I'm, more than happy to take that away and find you out the answer, Kev. But personally, I don't know if we charge call-out charges for that instance where we can prove it wasn't our fault, it was theirs. I don't actually know the answer to that. But I don't think we do, but maybe it's something we should look at, is what you're saying. And it's something that we can definitely add to the list of notes from this evening. Yeah, so to my knowledge, that's an insurance issue. I think Kathy or John should be able to come back in onto that.
But on that, I've got your personal insurance issue.
Again, my understanding is obviously if there's damage within inside the property, that's why we sort of encourage all the tenants to get contents insurance because they would need to claim off the contents insurance.
Okay, but I would say 100% of insurance companies where you get contents insurance, you pay an excess. So are we saying a council, we give permission for laminated flooring to go in, not a problem, through no fault of that council tenants at all, there's flooding, we dig it up, and we say to the council tenant, you now need to claim off your personal insurance, which we've advised you to do, and you're going to cop the bill for the excess, which we know can be £400 or £500. So I just want to know where we stand for the council tenant.
Yeah, sure. John, do you want to answer that one? Thank you.
Yeah, look, I think it depends on the situation. Like, obviously, Brook House, it was a burst pipe, which was the fault of Essex Water. If it's in a block of flats and there's a stack pipe which has gone wrong, then clearly that's the council's responsibility as the freeholder. We have insurance we can claim on, and we would obviously put back anything. It just depends on the situation.
So that's not right then, is it? You've got, because what it clearly
Sorry, go into it, guys, but can you please make sure when you're speaking your mic's on and when you're not...
my apologies. It clearly says there, as far as I'm concerned, quite clearly that it's the responsibility of the tenant to replace those laminated floors. You're saying that's not necessarily the case. It'd be on a base-to-base case, but then that needs to be clarified, doesn't it? Because if I was reading that and I was a tenant, I'd be cacking myself, thinking if a bike goes when it's not my fault, I'm going to be responsible for the exit, for the insurance in the first place. And what if you can't afford the insurance? It's only an encouragement for them to do that. So they might not be able to afford contents insurance, although we'd like them to. But if they can't afford it, what happens there when it's no fault of theirs? I don't think that's been. There's something wrong there. I'll be very unhappy if I was a tenant.
More detail there.
We need more detail again and again. This is what this is about, isn't it?
Yeah, can I just clarify on that actually, Councillor Blake, is your concern what the council's policy is or the way it's described in the handbook?
Well, depending what Adele comes back, it could be. It certainly is this, because that's certainly not clear. And I just think the policy of you can claim off your insurance and cop the excess is absolutely, totally wrong in my eyes.
So could we ask then that we have another look at the wording there in line with Councillor Blake's direction, and also could we report back on the policy and what the officer's view is on that?
All right, can I just make a point? Obviously, it doesn't have to be flooring, but if there's something which happens in the flat and it's not the tenant's fault and it's the landlord's fault, then the landlord would normally reimburse, wouldn't they? That's
not what it says.
Yeah, I guess we'll make it clearer. That's the
It's certainly not what it says.
Doesn't say
And I
either,
am concerned about the excess. In fact, even if they can afford the responsibility, I know we encourage it to do it, but yeah. And only one other, the supply of gas. Back to number, was that back to 16? I might be on there. Who's responsible for the supply of gas? The tenants are responsible for the supply of gas.
Utility company's responsible.
Well, it's got here, supply of gas, tenant's responsibility. It actually says it here.
we can't. Yeah, we can't actually tell you which gas supplier to use as a landlord. So it's up to you to, a tenant to choose both their electricity and their gas. We can't, as a landlord, tell you must use this company. I think that's what it means. It's not. Yeah.
The answer's fine. I'm stupidly just naturally assumed the council would have a deal with a energy company that would supply all their houses, which to me sounds like common sense.
We're not legally allowed.
No, that's fine. I actually didn't know that, but that just seemed like that would have been a good idea for their sake. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. Councillor Brockman, I think you had a question, didn't you? Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for all the hard work you've put in for this. What I'd like to know is two things. What cost does this come to making this new leaflet or booklet or whatever? And how many man-hours has it taken? How many people to do it? Because it seems that it's going to be a very expensive exercise that the council's having to cover.
Councillor Brown, I think you'd like to answer
Full
that one.
disclosure, I could not tell you right now how many hours this has taken or for how long. What I can tell you is, legally we have to do it. Yeah. Morally we have to do it. And our tenants are demanding that we do it. I think it's a reasonable question not to question whether or not we should have done it, but I guess it's a reasonable question to say, okay, how much does that cost you? As a cabinet member, I couldn't tell you right now, but I'm happy to go away and find out.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further
Thank you very
questions?
much. I look forward to seeing those figures. Be interesting.
Okay. Councillor Headley.
Thank you, Chairman. I think in the preamble it says we're to offer feedback on the. So in the spirit of offering feedback, I'm primarily interested in fire safety, which I'm assuming you cover under health and safety in your home. I guess would be. Smoke detectors are mentioned as a tenant under electrical items, but you also cite lessons learned from the tragedy at Grenfell Tower. I'm assuming you also looked at Larkenhall House, which was one fire started inside and one fire started outside. Unfortunately, we've suffered a number of fires in the borough. Bockingham Green springs to mind, which is one I visited with the cladding on the properties on that estate, it was wood cladding, and the council arranged for all of that cladding to be removed and then incapacitable cladding to be put on. But some of the leaseholders didn't comply with that, so there is a risk there. The other problem with I can't see anywhere here. You mentioned the ECUs, which again, if they're 60-year-old properties, are we confident that consumer units to modern standards with all the appropriate earth leakage strips have been installed on every property where it's necessary? That's for starters. I've got one more.
Robust approach to that area would be my response.
Yeah, well, I know we put sprinklers in Brook House because of Grenfell Tower, but you didn't answer the question directly about the number of consumer units that have been replaced. If some of our properties are 60 or 70 years old, are we confident that they've all been rewired to modern IEE standards?
Yes, is the answer. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I was just checking, but I think that should be covered in there. The other electrical issue: a number of fires have occurred in vehicles and scooters and wheelchairs used by disabled people when they're recharging their batteries. Is there any advice on charging appliances, particularly heavy-duty appliances? And whilst you have to get written permission for additional sockets, would the expectation be if someone bought an electric vehicle that required a heavy-duty charger, that they would have to get written permission to have that installed? Yeah, perhaps that should be covered in a little bit more detail.
Be more explicit.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially with obviously the grants available now for EVs. And yes, we would absolutely need permission. We would have to have it signed off by a competent electrician. Obviously, AC up to 22 kilowatt charger would need our permission and signed off by a, what's it called, NIE's electrician, absolutely.
Yeah, perhaps.
There's several areas where I don't think they've been missed on purpose. I just think it's trying to be comprehensive is always difficult. Something will always crop up, and legislation changes almost on a weekly basis. And when I was involved in the fire industry, it's the 28th edition of the IE regs. They're probably up to 30 of now, and in any way it won't be. It'll be a European standard unless they've gone back.
Thanks, Councillor. I think it's a good point. The only thing that I also would add is this electric scooters. We perhaps haven't got to the bottom of that issue at the moment. It's very difficult because you can just buy these quite cheaply now. They're made in China. We know a lot of fires have been started by those batteries because they're not necessarily the safest. And we have been working on a policy on that, but it's extremely difficult because it's not just disabled people that seem to use them. A lot of people, especially in our old people scheme, they want places to charge them which are safe, but it's not always possible. So yeah, that to me is one of the biggest issues that's emerging at the moment.
As the Cabinet member said, they're going to look at that, so I leave it to you to provide a more comprehensive assessment of electrical safety and the rules around what you can and can't do with heavy-duty chargers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions really have come out from comments from members so far. Firstly, when it comes to the document, I presume, I don't know how comprehensive it is, but yeah, I would expect there would be like clarity around what a tenant's responsibility for repairs are, which are normally, the case in properties. It appears there's some confusion in certain aspects of that needs to be picked up. There have been kind of concerns raised by members tonight. So firstly, I mean, is that the list a comprehensive list of what that are outlining what the repair responsibilities are for tenants, or is there more work to be done on that area? What I did pick up initially was the amount of work that's been gone into this document so far, and it's really been brought up to date, and is very current, which is good to see. I suppose really what I would like to see is, and I know it's been alluded to in the document itself, that there needs to be more comms to make it a little bit more attractive. So, I mean, it's got all the words involved that you would expect to see in the document, but it's not a very appealing document to read. It needs to draw people in and say, look, I want to read this, everyone's really interested in each of these sections. I mean, it's obviously not rocket science, it's something that's been done over many years by housing providers, so I'm presuming also that we are presumably members of the Tenants Participation Advisory Service. I would imagine that their comments have been sought, or their advice sought on how to proceed with this document. So what I'm looking forward to really is to see what really comes out of the Housing Improvement Board and the tenants' input into this. Also, if I can provide a bit more clarity as to what their input has been so far in this document, which I think is a very important aspect to this, because obviously the end user are going to be our tenants, so it's very important their views are picked up on this to develop it as a fully comprehensive and usable document.
John, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I think on sort of the section 3, maintaining your home, we've tried to basically say what you're given at the beginning of your tenancy, i.e. the fixtures and fittings, are the council's responsibility to repair, basically. And we've tried to then list them by saying, if you put in your own shed, clearly we're not going to come and fix it. And hopefully that was clear, but obviously not. We'll go back and maybe review that and say, how can we make this a bit clearer? But the principle simply is, when you move in, then there won't be curtains, there won't be blinds, there won't be carpet. That's your responsibility. But actually the rest of it that's already there is our responsibility as the landlord. We want you to look after it, we want you to take good care, clean it, etc. But when it does go wrong, we will repair it. That's what we're trying to get across. And of course, things like the gutters, actually, when it's on a flat, it will be our responsibility. But yeah, so look, we've tried to make it simple. We'll go away and try and make it a bit easier to read. I understand it's a big document, but there's a heck of a lot of information we need to get out there. Really good point about communication. We historically haven't been great at it. We were going to try really hard over the next year to, before winter comes, we should be saying, what do you do to make your house winterproof? Simple things, but that could get rid of 5% of our repairs, for example. So it's such a valid thing to do. So it's a hand in hand, isn't it? It's not just a tenant's handbook. It's about refreshing people's memory. You should be doing X, Y, and Z. You should be, yeah. So we'll take that on board and we'll go away. And I don't know if anyone else wants to answer about tenant involvement.
Councillor Brown.
We've mentioned a few times about the Housing Improvement Board, and that did, when we first set that up, that did come to scrutiny here, and this is an agenda on our item for our next meeting. So that Housing Improvement Board has those tenant representatives on. They are engaged in with other tenants, and there's subgroups, and there is training on board with that. So they're not an unsupported group of residents. And we've tried to recruit residents that are a broad spectrum, and in terms of different parts of the borough, in terms of age, and all of those kind of things. But just to assure you that this is coming before our next Housing Improvement Board, and will subsequently continue to do so. So the tenants are fully engaged in that process and will be a huge voice in ensuring that we get this right, working with our officers, with cabinet members responsible, with councillors, and with our tenants. It's very inclusive, and everyone on that Housing Improvement Board has equal footing. Nobody has more status than anyone else.
Okay, thank you. Also, I don't know if I was correct to assume, but this is only going to be online, this document? No, there's going to be hard copies.
At the moment, we've not made our final decision about how that's going to be. From the first engagement we've had with those tenant representatives that are sitting on the Housing Improvement Board, is that I see huge value is predominantly it being available as a digital document. But we're also aware that that might not suit everyone. So as part of that progress, as we come to the end of just finalising what this document looks like, at that point we'll have had several other meetings and engagement with those tenants, and them working in collaboration with our officers and that service stream will come to a decision about how else we might provide it. We don't at this time, neither do they see much benefit in providing a paper copy to every tenant, for example. That's not something that they feel would be valuable. However, it's recognised that a paper copy might be suitable for some tenants. And so we are working with the representation on that Housing Improvement Board in order to come up with the best solution. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thanks very much for that clarity. Thank you.
Is that cool? Is it the other one? No.
That's what you
Seem
need.
to have a technical issue. Sorry, I think that was my fault. Councillor Blake, you had a question.
Yeah, I was going to let this go. I know Del mentioned it, and again, it's been mentioned again. The guttering, because you were saying you make it as clear as possible that the outside is all responsible of the council, and we make it clear possible. And then the next thing we say, but the guttering's your responsibility. So again, I don't think that's clear. But one of the issues again with guttering, and I'm using my own experience again, I'm happy that I've got a huge council tree outside my property. Let me make that quite clear. I do not want it cut back. However, unfortunately, I live in a bungalow. And when my guttering gets filled up with leaves from the council's tree, I can get up and do it because I'm able to do that. Because I'm being 6'4" certainly helps as well, and I can just do it, not a problem. If you've got a council tenant that lives in a house and there's a council tree, just like mine, going guttering it, you're telling me again that's the responsibility of them. And what do? We're told you shouldn't be talking about getting ladders. You're talking about scaffolding to do it. So are we talking about a resident, a tenant of this borough, having to use a scaffolding to clear out their guttering because that's the council's policy, which is clearly said in here?
Yes. Thank you. Sorry,
Hi.
Kathy. Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, Councillor Blake, we've just checked the handbook. As I say, it's draft. On page 12, sorry, it does say the guttering, rainwater pipes and clips and gutter clearance is landlord's responsibility in the handbook.
So again,
So it's saying gutter clearance and the guttering, rainwater pipes and clips are the landlord's responsibility.
okay.
So whether that's correct or not, based on what we'd said as say it's draft, what we'd said earlier on, we would need to go back and double check that this is correct in there, and we'll come back to you. Yeah.
Well, I'm only going by what Adele said earlier as cabinet member, that you made it quite sternly as well, that it's the responsibility of the tenant, and I'm saying it shouldn't be the responsibility of the tenant in a situation, an example that I've given. It's as clear as mud at the moment, if I'm being honest.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I think tenants are responsible for ensuring that their gutters are cleaned We are responsible for ensuring that they have a gutter and that it's not, you know, falling off. Does that make sense? So tenants are responsible for cleaning out their gutters. We are not responsible for cleaning their gutters. We're responsible for ensuring they've got one and it works. That's my understanding.
I can't be bothered to go back on what I said on the
I know,
back to the form earlier, but I don't
we
think
need
that's
to
what
make
it
it
said.
clearer.
Yeah,
We need
yeah.
to make it clearer, Kev. I completely appreciate that, and we can look at that as part of when we're going through the language and ensuring that the detail that is there makes it explicit.
Councillor Brotman.
Call me being awkward. Who's going to turn their
You're
computer?
being awkward.
Just being awkward. Just,
For a change.
and I do own my own home, so I'm going to be a bit awkward like you know, because you know he's pedantic. I get my window cleaner to empty my gutters out for me twice a year.
I can't afford that.
Oh, you tight person.
Okay, so just moving on. Any further questions from the members or observations for that matter? No. So I did have some general ones, if I may. So it sounds very much like this document is quite significantly different from the previous versions, if I understand what Councillor Brown said in her introduction. So have we considered including a what's different section? Or some kind of communication that signposts residents to key changes. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, that has been, the work on that has started in terms of thinking how we're going to communicate the fact that this is a new document, and that's part of the comms process that will occur once this draft document comes to fruition and becomes a standard document. Then the comms plan of how to communicate that will then start to be implemented. So we're talking, you know, down the track, but that is something definitely that the work stream has started on how we're going to communicate with our residents. And obviously those residents, those tenant reps that sit on our housing improvement board are going to be part of that conversation and part of helping us inform what is the best way forward with that.
Great, thank you. I mean, obviously, I think we're all in agreement. The comms plan is pretty critical, and you know that is definitely a flip side of an online document. Is obviously it's a positive is it's a living document that constantly updates. The disadvantage is it doesn't land like an old-fashioned telephone directory on your lap. And you think, oh, that's changed. I need to read it, kind of thing. Okay, the only other questions I had were. In connection, actually, with some of the other things we've already discussed today on different agenda items, did we consider including a section on AWAB's law and particularly how residents can help themselves avoid issues with damp and mould? And also, do we think we're strongly enough flagging the implications of fraud within the document?
That's not the purpose of this document, to be fair. We can go away and talk about whether or not it should be to add additional things to that, but this is more of a your responsibility, our responsibility, how that partnership works. But in terms of how we advise and work with our tenants in order that they are more aware of those things, other than the comms programs we have in place to do that, it's something that we can go away and consider at the Housing Improvement Board and discuss that with our tenant reps and see how they feel about that. But yes, definitely worth a conversation. But no, it's not something that we've seen the purpose of this document being thus far. But it's something definitely we can take under advisement and have a conversation.
Thank you. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, in terms of AWAB's law, it doesn't have to be super comprehensive. So thinking about the section where there's a grid that says we're responsible for this, you're responsible for that. You might want to say we're responsible for major mould works, but you're responsible for general maintenance. Well, I'm not picking my words very well, but you get the picture. Okay, yeah, so that was all my questions. Any further questions from anyone else on the committee before we move on? Okay, lovely. So I think the next agenda item for consideration is number 7, the hate crime policy, which is on pages 67 to 101 of the report. Just before Cheryl does her summary, I'll just read the matters for consideration, which are fairly straightforward. The Housing Scrutiny Committee is to consider and provide feedback on the proposed hate crime policy prior to commencement of the public consultation.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to present Basildon Boroughs Council's proposed draft hate crime policy. This is an important step in reaffirming our commitment to creating a borough where everyone feels safe, respected and valued. Currently, how we address hate crime is included in the antisocial behaviour policy. However, it is best practice to separate it. Hate crime is a serious issue that undermines community cohesion and creates fear and division. It refers to criminal offences or incidents perceived to be motivated by hostility or prejudice towards a person's race, religion or belief, disability, sexual orientation or transgender identity. Sadly, despite national and local efforts, hate crime remains a concern. Essex Police recorded over 3,500 offences in 2024, and we know that underreporting is significant due to fear, lack of confidence and perceived barriers to justice. This policy sets out a clear framework for prevention, support and enforcement. Prevention through education and awareness campaigns, challenging prejudice and promoting inclusion. Support for victims via hate incident reporting centres and partnerships with Essex Police and local organisations. Robust enforcement against perpetrators, including tenancy action where appropriate and strong collaboration with the Safer Basildon Partnership. The policy aligns with the Equality Act 2010 and the Public Sector Equality Duty, ensuring that we eliminate discrimination, advance equality of opportunity and foster good relations across our communities. It also supports our corporate plan ambitions, people, places, promise and public service by making Basildon a safer, more inclusive borough. Following this meeting, we will launch a 6-week public consultation commencing tomorrow and closing on the 16th of February. The consultation will include community events, social media engagement, newsletters and an online survey to ensure residents' voices shape the final policy. The draft hate crime policy is currently with involved residents for consultation and the final version of the policy will be presented to Cabinet in February 2026.
Lovely, thank you, Cheryl. Any questions from the members on either the enclosure number 1, the summary documents, or the policy document itself? Councillor Webb?
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I very much welcome separating the hate crime policy from the antisocial behaviour policy. It's very, very important. I welcome what the consultation as well that's being rolled out. But of course, hate crime doesn't actually stop at Basildon Council, at the Basildon Council's doors. It's something that is living and is out there, and it needs to be informed to as many people as possible. I suppose my main question really at this stage is, how is this going to be rolled out? I think it's critically important that staff members within the council are aware of hate crime, not only hate crime in itself, but how that can be reported and referred on to the appropriate bodies. I remember being, indoctrinated as a hate crime ambassador when it was first rolled out a few years ago, and it's kind of had a bumpy road since then. But again, I think it's all down to effective communication and keeping that message out there and consistently. So although the consultation is to be welcomed to get the message out there, it's something that needs to be a continuous rolling programme. But again, I come back to this point, I suppose initially, how that consistency is going to be kept up with within the council itself, with all members being aware of the responsibilities they have if they are faced with potential hate crime incidents.
Didn't want to make it too easy. No, you're absolutely right. And like your good self, I was part of the rollout of the hate incident reporting centres several years ago, where we were training officers within the organisation as hate crime ambassadors. And I think it's fair to say what we are very conscious of with regards to this hate crime policy is that there is a continuation of that. What we don't want to do is launch something and then it falls by the wayside, in all honesty. And you mentioned the council as the council is still a hate incident reporting centre. But I think what we're very conscious of with our colleagues with resident involvement is that actually, is this always the best place that people want to come to report a hate incident? Or is it that we need to get out and work with our communities and get into those groups and set up a bespoke service within those communities? And that's what we're looking at now. I think we're learning from that, and we're learning well, actually, in that it's not one size fits all, and we need to look to tailor our approach to fit our communities that we've got. So in some respects, people have reported that they feel much less intimidated in coming to council offices to report a hate incident than they would maybe our colleagues within the police. So that's positive, but there is still more to be done, and we are conscious that we need to work on that training. We need to be reviewing our hate crime ambassadors, and that this will be an ongoing process for sure. Thank you, Councillor Webb.
That's wonderful, thank you, that's good to hear. I suppose also further on from that, I think it's also important, I think, for me, that councillors should also be trained, regularly trained up on hate crime and the different aspects to it, so we're all actually informed and on board with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't disagree. I think that the training is actually valuable for everybody with regards to be able to signpost constituents and offer support, etc. So, yes, yeah, we take that on board. Absolutely. Thank you.
Councillor Brockman.
Here we go again. You're going to hate me again. I'm just going to say, put it out there. It's not only officers that suffer hate crime in here. It is members. I'm one of them who's suffered recently. In fact, I've just had an email come through tonight while I'm sitting here. It's disgusting. Okay, it's about Thursday's meeting, of course, and we all know what's coming up there. So I want to know is what or if is this council going to do to not only protect its officers, what are they doing to protect its members? Because we've got people who are getting abuse, like myself, maybe Kevin, maybe Tony. Kevin don't take the notice anyway. But there's some of us. We've also got some of us members who've had a stalker, which I had for 3 o'clock in the morning, banging on my door and banging on my bedroom window, and various other things. So, all because of another, whoever, I'm not going to name names, this is happening all the time. So what are we doing about it, please?
Julie?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Brockman. I hasten to add, the policy that we're discussing isn't merely targeted towards officers. This is targeted towards residents, which would include anybody that wanted to use this service to report a hate incident, which would include your good selves. I would also add that issues with regards to governance surrounding yourselves, we will certainly take back to our colleagues any reports of hate or harassment. Then we would work alongside our colleagues in governance concerning that. But this is a service that is open to everybody. It's absolutely inclusive. That's very much the purpose of it. The fact that it's a service that's sort of promoting equality and people being able to report hate and hate incidents, it's open to everybody. It's not an officer policy. It's for tenants and residents. It's for tenants and residents. It could be used by officers, it could be used by anybody, but this is a policy that's targeted for our tenants and residents that's been separated from an existing policy of antisocial behaviour. Right, okay. Thank you, Councillor Brotman. I do hope that's answered your question. Thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, and for Councillor Brotman, I would encourage you to speak with governance over anything and everything that you receive in that way, because it's completely unacceptable that either our officers or us as elected officials and or as residents, whoever it might be, receiving such things. And it's important that you report it, and then our governance team can take action.
You know.
Yeah, I more than do know, yes, but it's important that you report it.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, I've had to go to the expense of having CCTV cameras put around my house, ring doorbells, you name it, even to a point of having a security guard at one stage. It got that bad. But it's not only residents against residents, if you get what I mean, or tenants against tenants. It is tenants against us. And I'm not going to say if it definitely happens, but it could be someone in here doing it to others. If you just, you know, I'm not. It's just a minefield at the moment. Yeah.
Report it.
Thank you. Any further questions from any members of the committee? No. I mean, I did have some general questions, if I may. The first one was, I have to be honest, I wasn't totally clear how the overlap or the relationship between the council on the one hand and Essex Police on the other hand works from the document. So I just wondered if there's anything that could be done to maybe bring that to life a little bit more for the reader.
Yes, that's a fair point, Chair, and we'll take that away and look into that, because we do have a close working relationship with our colleagues at Essex Police. In fact, the hate crime officer spends some time working within our collaborative community safety hub. So there is a real strong working relationship there with regards to the partnership. But no, you're absolutely right. The link between Essex Police and Basildon Borough Council, we will elaborate upon that in the document. Thank you.
Thanks. Second question was, are there any particular sanctions that are available to the council in terms of tenants who might indulge in hate incidents or hate crime? Is that stipulated in the document?
Yes, absolutely. There are various sanctions within our tenancy agreement, which would include someone behaving in an antisocial manner. It would also include a conviction of a criminal offence. And what I can say with absolute assurance is our colleagues within the antisocial behaviour team take very robust action against individuals that have been proven to be causing hate crime or hate incidents within the community against residents or tenants of the borough.
Thank you. On the subject of tenants, in terms of the consultation, is there a minimum participation target or requirement for tenants within the overall number of, I can't remember what the number was actually, the overall number of people?
Very good question, Chair, one of which unfortunately I don't know the answer to. I'm just going to look to my colleague. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's, if I'm right, it says in the report we need to reach a certain number of responses for it to be valid, but it doesn't actually stipulate any contents.
Yeah, because it affects everybody within the community, it's a broader response. But you're right, we need a percentage to work toward. So we would be looking at the community generally. So we will establish what best practice is across other boroughs, and we will use that as a measure. Yeah, thank you. It's a very good point.
Lovely.
We'll
Thanks.
feedback that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And what else did I have? Yeah, kind of very general question, but again, going back to the question of resource, do you think there's more that we could or would do here if we had the power or the resources to do so on hate crime?
Yeah, I don't think that would cause a change within the policy. With regards to resourcing within the authority, we've got incredible work being done with regards to antisocial behaviour, enforcing criminality. So I'm confident that if there was a evidence need for enhanced resources, that we would be supported in that within the organisation. I know it's a priority for us as a council, so I've got good confidence that if I made a case that we needed additional resources, that would be supported where possible.
Thank you. Can I just ask my last question and come back to you, Councillor Blake? There was one point, just to clarify, that I thought was interesting. I think if I read the report correctly, that age is a protected characteristic. But if an attack was launched upon somebody based upon their age, it might be difficult to qualify or quantify that, but it would not be categorised as a hate incident or crime. Is that right?
Yeah, age is a protected characteristic, so it would, yes. So it should be. It would be very much dependent on the incident. So it'd be again case by case basis. But if it was proven that, you know, the verbal or physical assault or the harassment was as a direct result of somebody's age, then yes, that's covered.
So that would be regarded as a hate
Yes.
incident or
Age.
attack?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Blake, I think you had a question.
Before I get to my main one, the other one, the obvious one, fat. Is there, you know, I mean, the amount of times I'm called a fat so-and-so, and it's just the same as ageism. Would that also be, if it was done in a derogatory way, would that be come under that as that particular? I was going to ask that earlier, but I thought, no. So you can have a go at someone. It's not. You can have a go at someone for age, but you can't have them going for being.
Yeah, it's not a recognised characteristic. It's not a protected characteristic as things stand. But I hasten to add that, but these things are evaluated continuously. So that's not to say that it wouldn't be in the future. But as it stands now, I'm afraid not, Councillor Blake.
All right. So on that level, I've got to carry on suffering then. Yeah. But on the point that actually that you raised, just for clarity, this, and I know the answer to this. I know you're going to say when you said it's how many complaints come in before it becomes a hate crime. Those definitions have to be categorised and been proven to be a genuine complaint. Otherwise, what you could have is 20 people phoning up saying Kevin Blake's fat so-and-so, and you know. So you'd have to make sure that those complaints are actually genuine before it become. I think I'm trying to get back. What I'm trying to get to, what you mentioned a couple of minutes ago. There's got to be so many complaints before you take it seriously. I don't mean that in a flippant way. Surely those complaints have got to be justified. Or am I reading that totally wrong?
Actually, sorry, Councillor, just to clarify, my question was more, I understood that we had to have a certain volume of responses to the survey in order to meet our requirements. It was a slightly different thing. Sorry if I didn't explain that clearly.
Yeah, with regards to hate crime or hate incidents, it's not an amount of reports. It's about the incident itself. So one isolated incident would absolutely suffice with regards to the matter being dealt with as an incident of criminality, harassment, etc. And that would be very much dependent on the incident.
Any further questions on the hate crime policy? No. Okay, so let's move on to tenant satisfaction measures. Item 8, tenant satisfaction measures communications plan update. This is pages 103 to 121 of the report. I think Councillor Brown is going to do a brief presentation. Just before she does, I'll just read the recommendation. which is that the Housing Scrutiny Committee is asked to note the development and ongoing implementation of the Tenant Satisfaction Measures Communications Plan, which supports compliance with the regulator of social housing's new consumer standards. So, Councillor Brown, I think over to you.
Again, you know, obviously members of the committee have had this for the last month, so I'm not intending to go through all of it with you. I just want to kind of focus on 2 points, really. I think the first is, why do TMS matter, that tenant survey? Why does it matter? And also what we're doing to ensure that tenants are genuinely supported in order to take part, and that we get a full spectrum of views. So we all know that tenant satisfaction measure is part of that regulator of social housing that came into effect on the 1st of April 2023. And so therefore that we know that what we have to do there, it's very clearly set out, and it's something that our officers definitely understand, and the housing team know what they need to do. I think that you can see that members have rightly asked about how we're doing that in practice. And what does that look like? So I just want to run back to 2024. We launched the survey then on the 13th of December. It really properly got going that sort of first full week back in January 2025. And that we intend to do a subsequent additional launch again to start looking at it towards the end of January. What we need to point out is there's a lot of activity around that previously, when we were doing this, we didn't have as much early engagement to follow up in terms of telephone calls and activity. We found that when responses were quite low before, we were quite late to react to that. And so this time we've been far more proactive. We've looked at everything from the way in which the survey is constructed. We know that there are key questions that have to be asked in a certain order, in a certain way, but other questions and things that we were asking, could we make that simpler? Could we make it easier? Could we ensure that you might open and think, oh, that's going to take me half an hour, I'm not bothering with that. How can we shorten down the things that we don't need to do? How can we make it easier to get the highest level of engagement possible? So we've looked at that, and we've looked at that with regards to speaking to our residents, you know, what was difficult before, how can we improve that? So enhancing that accessibility through that early feedback. We're making sure that we've made survey adjustments, as I've said. We've introduced a more direct loop in terms of feedback and how quickly it comes from the information they're giving us into our service. We've also allocated housing teams with clear targets and named tenant contacts, so that we have a definite plan of who is contacting whom and when, in a way that we didn't really have before. Before it was much like, what can we do this week to get some more done, where now we've got a clear plan of what we're going to be doing over the next 3 months to ensure that we get the highest level of engagement possible. We're also making it easier for our tenants in terms of the ways in which we've offered the survey to be completed. We've got postal surveys, we're doing telephone interviews, and we've also got online completions. So there are 3 streams, if you like, of ways in which our tenants can engage. I think that's really important, so that it's not just digital, because obviously that is dependent on your access to technology, but also your confidence around it. So we've made sure that we've changed that to an extent. I think the most important part of what we're doing definitely is the comms team this time, and their involvement in the way in which we're communicating with residents, to say from when we first launched it, each week messages are going out on our social media streams. They made a pathetic video of me. I do not recommend you watching it. It's not really my forte. But we're also ensuring that we are identifying through our other services where there might be accessibility requirements for residents and how we can work through that. So I'd say that we're much more proactive this time. It's a much more robust process, and therefore we're expecting that we will get even higher returns. I think you can see that we are meeting the targets we have to do legally, and we outstripped that last year, but we would still want a higher level of engagement, and that's what this is about. I think I'd like to point out as well, alongside the surveys themselves, I think members should note the progress that's been made on tenancy audits. The fact that, you know, by June, that we'd already completed what we needed to complete for that year, that 20% had already been done, and that those audits are a key part of feeding into this information. I'd also like I think it's important that we also look briefly at outcomes. Obviously, we're going to look at that a little bit more in a moment. But I just want to highlight the fact that as members, we should be really critical. We are making improvements, but we do need more. And that culture of continuous improvement is something that definitely is evident amongst the housing team. I think that's really positive. However, you know, members can clearly see from the data where our drivers are more positive in terms of complaints handling, communication, those kind of things. We've been very proactive and we've been very positive about, and that tenants are reflecting that in their opinions. Where tenants aren't as happy is in terms of repairs. As John's mentioned earlier, our ageing stock adds to that, but I think we all need to be clear as well that that is one of our strongest drivers of tenant dissatisfaction. We've listened to that message, and as you all know, we've made the decision that we are going to, as an administration, that we're going to take that back in-house. By doing so, we believe that we're taking responsibility rather than outsourcing it to others. We're going to be able to be far more proactive, but we're also going to be more accountable in the fact that as a council, we will now be the people who are providing that repair service. And therefore, we believe that that will definitely lead to better outcomes and a higher rate of satisfaction for our tenants. I just want to finally to sort of summarise a little bit by saying the whole point of doing this, yes, it's a legal requirement, we have to do it, but it's something that we were doing to a lesser extent before, and that we are doing in various areas, engaging with our residents, engaging with our tenants and saying, tell us what we do well so we can do more of it, tell us what you're not happy about so we can make the right changes in order to support that and improve that. And that is something that we've been very proactive in. As part of that feedback loop, it matters. The information they give us, I want to assure you that it doesn't just go on a system somewhere that says, you know, 17% complained about this, 35% loved that. It is something that informs the work of that housing service, and that is crucial that we emphasise that, and that it does also inform the work that the Housing Improvement Board is doing, and that our tenant reps within that board are key players in looking at this data and looking at what does it tell us about the way in which we perform as a landlord. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any questions from the members on this item? Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do note the improvements have been made and the processes that have been put in place, which is good, and I think that will serve well when obviously the regulators come in and start to look at processes. I suppose my main concern at this stage, I'm going back now to what we were discussing previously with AWAB's law, which came into effect in October last year. We're now into 2026, and there's going to be a new tranche of regulation coming in and responsibility on ourselves as a landlord around electrical repairs, for example, was going to be one of those drivers. I mean, how geared up are we at the moment? Bearing in mind we were looking at, looking at our repair service and a whole new way of dealing with that. I mean, how is that kind of reflected on how we take things forward? I mean, are we looking in a healthy position?
Yeah, look, we've always been hot on compliance. You look at some of the C4 rulings that have been given, a lot of it's around their compliance, electrical, fire, etc. But we've always done what we have to do. So we are quite proud of that record, and we'll continue. And any sort of new way of working, compliance will come first and foremost. That'll be the first contract we get, basically. It's not something we can do in-house, not something we want to do in-house or physically can do. But yeah, I'm not worried about that. We'll take that forward and we'll smash it.
Thank you. So just a general question from me, really, which is, are we okay with our response rates so far, and are we actually going to have to bring in external help to make sure we hit the numbers?
Obviously, we've got a budget contingency in case we do. Like I said, last year we started much later, and had a less formulated proactive approach, and we had less ways in which we were engaging, and we managed to meet that deadline and to engage. About this time last year, we hadn't got the same level of response. I mean, at the moment, it's very low, the response rate we've got, but the action plan takes that into account and recognises that over Christmas people probably didn't want to really fill in a survey for Basildon Council. So obviously the work that moves forward coming into that, but we do have that contingency if needed. We don't expect to need it because of the plan that Joe has put in place. So I'm confident we're not going to need that. We didn't need it last year, and we're more organised, more proactive, and have got better resources this year in-house than we had. I can't see us needing it, but it is there in case we do.
Thank you. Did you have a question on that, Councillor
Oh, I
Blake?
nearly made my first political point in, but I won't.
Please don't.
I'm going to do a good one about surveys over Christmas period. No,
We've given people 3 extra weeks.
I'm going to be fine.
Okay. Any further questions on this agenda item then? Okay. Okay, so I think we now move on to item 9 on the agenda, the Housing Improvement Plan Quarterly Progress Update. That's you again, Councillor Brown. It's pages 123 to 142 of the report. I'll just briefly read the matters for consideration, which are on page 124, and they are that the Housing Scrutiny Committee is asked to note the development and ongoing implementation of the Housing Improvement Plan, which supports compliance with the Regulator of Social Housing's new consumer standards and prepares the Council for inspection.
Okay, so back to me again. Okay, so I want to sort of focus that this is a quarterly progress update on our housing improvement plan. And I want to be very clear about why that plan exists and how it's going to be used. We know that since April 2024, the Regulator of Social Housing and the way in which that operates has been greatly strengthened. And that now we need a much more proactive approach. It needs to be evidence-led in the ways in which you want to improve, and obviously, ultimately, inspection-based. So every large social landlord, previously this only really applied to housing associations, now it's been extended and includes councils, and that we're going to be inspected once every 4 years and what that looks like. We're all fully aware, and you're all as a committee aware of that from the training previously and what that's going to look like. So what's really important is that we have this, our housing improvement plan is a way in which it's a mechanism through which we can do that, through which we can have that culture of continuous improvement. That yes, we're doing great at these things, but we need to do a bit better of that, and what does that look like? As members have seen, the plan is deliberately a live document. It is regularly updated and reflects progress, it reflects emerging risks and changing regulatory expectations. It's structured around those 4 consumer standards that we've had before this committee of safety and quality, neighbourhood and community, tenancy and transparency and accountability. I just want to note for members that come October 2026, we're going to have a 5th standard that will come before you, that will be competence and conduct standard. I just want to really reassure the committee that as a service, we've already started looking at that. And although it doesn't come forward until October this year, I keep thinking we're still back in 2025, that training within our service has already begun. We've got some service in this month. Therefore, we are fully competent and we're really ahead of the game, if you like, in preparing our officers to be able to bring that standard forward. So I just want to sort of mention that. I think that what's important here is that we see that this quarterly update shows progress across a number of areas, including strengthening governance. It's got a clearer performance oversight, which is really important. It improves alignment between our tenant feedback and the way in which a service performs. And also it looks at what improvement activity has taken place, and it has a record for that. And it also has some scrutiny and oversight of it. A key element of this work is governance and tenant involvement, massively changing. The establishment of the Housing Improvement Board is central to that. Obviously, that recruitment has already happened for those representatives. We're also still thinking about how we can expand that. We're looking now at how we can have, although we've got these people who are our tenants, who are representative on our HIB. What work streams do we need below that? What working groups? A little bit like we have in the council working groups, looking at the same way in which we can get various residents involved in that kind of work stream to bring forward improvement. I want to assure members of the committee that training has taken place to support those tenants so that they feel equipped to be able to scrutinise in a really meaningful way. And it's not just symbolic, that the things that they say, that they have equal standing with on that board with the members that are there, with the cabinet members and also with our officers, but that they feel supported in that. And speaking to them, they really do feel empowered to say what they think, and and that's really important that we hear that. But I think it's also important that we recognise it's not just about outcomes, it's about genuinely empowering our residents and our tenants to be part of that process. Members will recognise that improvements must also be grounded in realism. And we had our first few meetings had quite a lot of conversations around what is the purpose of the Housing Improvement Board. Is it just to complain about everything that's ever happened, or is it to be really focused? And so we've been focused initially on looking at policies like the hate crime policy, like thinking about like the tenants handbook, looking at a policy-driven focus so that we get the foundations right and that the tenants are fully engaged in that process. And then it's a matter of prioritisation, looking with risk management and being able to demonstrate what are our key priorities and what progress is made upon those. And those key priorities will be driven partly by an administration priorities, partly listening to the expertise of our officers, but definitely tenant focus. What are their priorities and seeing that the home in which they live in is of a high standard and what that looks like, and how the relationship can be improved between them as a tenant and us as a social landlord. So the committee plays a crucial role in that whole assurance framework. We also have some scrutiny challenge in terms of it comes here. Some of it will go to ONS, and all of it comes before Cabinet. So there is also scrutiny and oversight and a level of governance outside of that. I just want to sort of say that I think that this demonstrates a whole new outlook and a whole new way in which we view our tenants and the importance of their voice in the way in which we write policy and the way in which we conduct our service. That may have been there, but it wasn't the centre of that culture. And I think that delivering safe, decent, tenant-focused housing is what this council is about. And that by having the HIB and the way in which we conduct ourselves and respect our tenants within that Housing Improvement Board definitely is having that kind of outcome. It's transparent, it's clear, and definitely far more tenant focused than historically has been the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any questions from the members on that agenda item?
Just one thing.
Yeah, Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to clarify, I mean, it's an excellent thing. I mean, I come from a tenant involvement background anyway, so it's a no-brainer for me. So this tenant engagement is crucial. Sorry. This tenant engagement is critical. It's crucial. What I would like to see is that, and be reassured that the HIB, or in some form or another, this will continue, and there will always be like a tenant board that will be there to inform on different aspects, not necessarily of policy, but of processes and procedures within the council. I mean, is that the vision to be taken forward?
Yeah, I mean, obviously this has begun from a point of view of we need to improve what we do. In order to do that successfully, that tenant needs to be at the centre of that, needs to be at the centre of the decisions we make, the policies we write and the actions we take. We do not see this going away. This is something that we see being strengthened further. And as I said earlier, having work streams below that is tenant focused and tenant driven. And so it's something that is going to only expand. It isn't something that's going to be gone away. Yeah, that is our vision for this to continue. Yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So just a few questions from me. So in the enclosure document, pages 129 to 142, starting with the safety and quality standard, we talk about the new tenancy compliance role. How effective is that proving to be? Julie? Kathy? Yeah.
So the compliancy officer role, which is new, which is for the gas and electric, and I think leading on from what was said earlier on, the dedication of the council to ensure we're compliant, is that we have obviously recruited an officer dedicated for that. So they're liaising directly with tenants that for some reason are denying us access, but there may be some other reasons why they'd be denying us access. So it's really to try and build up that relationship with the tenant, to try and encourage them to let us in. And if there are other issues, then that officer will help deal with that as well, because it may lead for other things. Sometimes it's because the tenants, aren't happy to let contractors in on their own, so we can arrange for the officer to be there. It's a very new post. She's been in post for a few weeks, and she is making quite a lot of headway into some of the tenants that we've been having proving difficulties, so that's quite good. And also we're looking at sometimes we do have to be compliant, so we have to take enforcement action, and we've been going through the courts, but the judges where we've been getting an injunction, they're not very keen on getting that way anymore, and we're looking at getting and it's very costly for tenants. It can be up to about £800 because they have to pay the costs. So the new officer's currently working with our legal department to look at using a warrant of entry that's obtained through the magistrates court. We can get them quicker, we can gain access quicker, but also it's hardly any cost to the tenant at all, and obviously is very beneficial for the council and for the tenant for their safety, so that we can check them. But early days, but it seems to be the right decision that the council's made to have someone dedicated to oversee it, and they're working very closely with Jonathan's team. So maybe I can come back at a later date to say how it is, because it's a very early new role at the moment, but at the moment it's looking very good.
Yeah, that sounds very positive. Thank you very much. Much broader question, really. Any update on the repair service transition plan? Obviously, that's mentioned in the report. John, do you want to just comment on that?
Yeah, well, we're taking it to Cabinet on next week, isn't it? Next week. But yeah, I think it's one of these things we're working on at pace. Yeah, but we've got a target operating model. It's just how we're delivering it and how consultants we're using, etc. Work in progress.
I've got a few questions on timings, actually. So what's the expected time frame for the completion of the tenancy review audit on all council homes? I think it's mentioned in the report, and there's some commentary on that, but not any specific timings, I think. Kath?
That's me again. So tenancy audits, to be fair, I think the council have not been very good at these in the past, and it's really important that we know who our tenants are, so that we can provide the current information for them and enhance our services. So we started it in June this year, last year, sorry, in 26 now. Started in June. The aim is that we would carry out an audit every 5 years on every tenancy. In line with the stock condition surveys that's done every 5 years. And the aim, we're looking at having a tenancy audit in place at the start of every tenancy, so we've got it right from the beginning. So obviously what we need to do is catch up, because we've got about 10,713 properties. So since June, so we've done 20% so far, which is really good, but we're trying to speed it up so that we don't want to take it that we get it all in 5 years' time. I want to try and speed it up so we get to a point that we've got them all, and then we'll start the 5-year annual reviews. Regards to timescale, all I can say is we're going as quick as we can at the moment. Residents, when we've done all the audits, then the aim is every 5 years we'll actually go to the homes and do the inspection with the stock condition team and get the tenancy audits. But what we're doing at the moment to try and speed it up is we are also allowing the residents to do it online. So we're getting the information about their data and relying on that stock condition have got their up-to-date details of the property at the moment, because the importance is just to try and gather their data at the moment so we do know who's in their properties. It is going really, really quite well. In sort of like since June, as I say, we've got 20% already, which is higher than I anticipated. And we are obviously now we're back in the new year. We're doing a big push again for the tenancy officers to try and encourage tenants are completing them online. Any that are having difficulties, they are contacting us, and the officers are going out and helping them. So that helps there. Some of them seem really quite grateful that someone is going out and actually, asking them, and we're finding giving advice at the same time. People that are under-occupying, overcrowded, maybe having a few problems and some safeguarding concerns. So it is helping us. We've got it so it's electronic. So the new housing management system that's being built. When that's finalised, the information we're collecting will just drop straight in there. So it doesn't got to have resource to input it. So we've had it built in the background, so that's ready to go as well. So it's quite positive. I don't actually, your question was when was it all going to be completed? I don't actually, I'd be lying if I said I actually know the date. All I can say is we're going as quick as we can, and it's quite positive at the moment.
Thank you for that. Yeah, Councillor Brown.
I think it's also important to note that we're ahead of schedule of what we would plan, because what we would plan is 20% each year, and we completed 20% in 6 months. So we're not then going to sit around and wait another 6 months before we do the next 20%. We're actually continuing to do that. So we are ahead of what the plan is. I think it's important to note that this historically has not been done. And it is something that we're really driving at the moment, and the importance, as Jonathan mentioned at the beginning, how this then is going to feed into that management system, and the data then that's how that's going to be used in order to plan our planned works, and therefore ensure that our housing stock is where we would want it to be, because obviously without knowing where it's at, it's very difficult to do that. And I think doing this audit work is crucial part of that, and it's a shame that we have not been as proactive in the past, but we definitely are now. And the team are working on this, and it is a key priority, knowing what state we are in, so then we can make those long-term choices and decisions that are going to affect the whole housing stock.
And I think you touched upon it, Cathy, but is there a timing for the Microsoft Dynamics-based new resident data system?
The in-house housing management system, they're currently, it's being built at the moment. I believe they're hoping, I think we're going to be starting to look at going training soon. Louise, is it around sort of like May, June time, hoping to go?
Fully live August.
Yeah, fully live in August. This is the house, yeah. I think it's, yeah. Yeah, I know they're actively working on it at the moment. I don't have the exact timescales, but it's definitely this year, isn't it? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And one last one on timing. There's a mention, I think, in the report about bespoke landlord branding, which sounds kind of flowery, but actually in a way it's important, I think, isn't it, to recognise our responsibility as a landlord. Is there a timing on that one?
Yeah, I think what's really important is understanding that as a council we have different partnerships and different relationships with different stakeholders, and understanding that our relationship with our tenants is different and should be different, and for those tenants they should recognise us as a different. We fix your bathroom leak because we are your landlord. We collect your bins because we are your council. And understanding who's responsible for what and why is important. And therefore having something that is separate, and ultimately a separate part on the website that is just for our tenants, that this is our responsibility to you, this is your responsibility to us, this is how we're working together to ensure the best homes, and that we are a good social housing provider. That is something that only affects those who live in our council homes. It doesn't affect the other 100,000 people that live in this area. And so therefore we need to ensure that we communicate with them in a different way. And so by being able to separate what we do as a landlord and what we do as a council is really important. And to stop that confusion, having something that is separate takes that away, and it also makes it easier for our tenants to communicate with us as a tenant-landlord relationship. So we can see it as a completely positive thing, distinguishing what our responsibilities are in different areas. Particularly as we move forward into LGR, this becomes more complicated. It's really important that our tenants know how and what we're responsible for and how they can communicate with us. And so having something that is separate is easy accessible, and therefore we think that will take away some of that.
And is there a target timing for that separate website to be launched, for example?
Comms are working through that at the moment. The aim is that by the end of this first quarter that'll be up and running.
Thank you. Okay, I think that was it from my questions. Any further questions from the members on that one? No. Okay, let's move on then to item 10, Housing Performance Report presentation. Again, I think this is Councillor Brown with support from some of the officers, depending on appropriate. Yeah, so I don't think there are any matters for specific matters for consideration. So just over to you, Councillor Brown.
So here is just a summary of what the whole report's going to show you. It kind of unpacks why some indicators are below target and what that looks like. This is important because not all underperformance is the same. In some cases, it reflects structural pressures, such as access issues to properties, which Kathy's already highlighted. Sometimes it's been historic workforce capacity, which has started to change. Sometimes it's reflective of, as John's trying to explain, the ageing condition of our stock and the way in which we have invested in that in the last 20 years, the way in which we have planned works around that, and the way in which we have maintained and repaired that stock. And I think it's rather than that there hasn't been a lack of, it's not that there's been a lack of complete oversight or an absence of action. It's just that historically it's been very slow. And so this kind of looks at all of that. The distinction matters, particularly when we look at a regulatory context. The regulator is not going to expect perfection, but what they are going to expect is that we understand the issues, that we've got a grip of them, and that we've got a clear plan of how we're going to improve that. And that's why in our previous discussion, whether it was on our tenant survey measures, whether it was on our housing improvement board, our tenant handbook, all of that feeds into how these ultimate targets are going to be improved upon. So what we're going to do now is we're not going to go through all of the data slide by slide. What we are going to do is, because you've had it for a month, so I'm hoping you've read it. What we are going to do is each of our service heads are going to look at the beginning, sort of give you an overview of what those next 4 or 5 slides data looks like, and then give you the opportunity that if you do have questions about certain indicators or what's going down, what we're doing about it, we can answer that. Because I think if we went through line by line, you don't need it reading to you. So that's the way we're going to handle this. And obviously I'll take any questions that you like. So I think we're first up. I think, John, you're first up, I think. Thank you.
Hi, yes, you want to move. So I think the point about the reds, when you see 100% target, it's almost impossible to ever meet 100%, and even 99.9% would be red. So, especially things like gas, there's always people that won't let you in. You have to take them to court, say every quarter. HRA, decent home standards, we're pretty much there. Remember, this is a time-based thing for a lot of the time, so if someone doesn't want a new kitchen, and it's over a certain time age, it will not be decent under the legislation, so we'll never get 100%. We're trending upwards on the other indicators, which I'm very happy about, and things like the one that's important to me is the percent of emergency repairs within 24 hours. You know, when I questioned why we haven't got 100, it's there might be a subcontractor who didn't actually put it on the system until the next day, for example. So we are not leaving people who need an emergency repair in need, basically, because obviously that to me is the most important one. Happy to take any questions there.
Any questions? No, no questions. Thank you. So, Phil, you in the next section?
Yeah, if I could just come in on the on the last two stats there relate to my service area. Yeah, the percentage of cases closed for which the homelessness duty was accepted, I would suggest really that it's not appropriate to have a target attached to that. We accept the homelessness duty for those that we have the statutory duty to accept them to. Legally, we have to do that. Morally and ethically, we should do that. We wouldn't be able to turn people away or refuse to accept a duty where we are required to do it. So wherever we have that responsibility, we do so. The percentage of cases closed for which homelessness was prevented, very, very difficult and challenging to prevent homelessness for a number of reasons. We have a shrinking of the private sector housing market, which is becoming increasingly out of reach financially for people, as well as being more and more scarce. We've taken a number of measures to try and improve that. We have taken on to removing people's arrears where it's responsible and appropriate for us to do so. We have changed the allocations policy, so where people are able to remain at home for longer, we encourage them to do that, and also have measures in place to make it more reasonable for them to do that, whether it's providing stair gates, storage facilities, assistance for them to remain in those properties. Our measure there of the last quarter, the last reported quarter of 47%, I would say that nationally the figure is 53.9%, so we are not a million miles away from the national reporting there either. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? No? Okay. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I think Phil's really underselling what the team's doing. I don't think these figures completely reflect that. As a service, there is a huge emphasis now in terms of our priority, but also in terms of the way in which we are using resources to prevent homelessness before people present us with that, and identifying people that are at risk and what that looks like, and the ways in which we are financially ensuring that they don't become homeless before they present themselves for TA. And that is a massive new focus for the service. In the way in which that Phil and his team are using those resources to ensure that less people turn up at our door homeless. So I think the figures really undersell the priority and the work that has gone into that. Just want to say that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Okay. Anything? Yeah.
Chair, thank you. Yes, I will give you an overview of the figures concerning antisocial behaviour. As we know and have seen locally, our enforcement has increased hugely with regards to antisocial behaviour. We are fortunate enough that we don't have the same targets as John of 100%, so we have a 94% target with regards to the satisfaction with tenants in which the way that we've handled their case, and a 90% case with regards to the outcome. You will see, I'll highlight the dip because, you know, I'm acutely aware that you'll see it, of 82.8%, which was in June 25. I hasten to add that that is with regards to the outcome, and there are the outcome, albeit we have officers that are completing cases to a very high standard with regards to court action, etc. Unfortunately, we are never going to always please everybody, because some people's expectations of the way in which that we're able to resolve their case is just not something that is legally possible. The other dissatisfactions have on occasions been with regards to the length of time we wait for a court hearing, for example. I hasten to add we share Crown and County space here in Basildon, but our officers are brilliant in that they will travel miles to get the court hearing in early so that they can offer some immediate resolution to residents and tenants within the borough, which is brilliant. So they've been travelling far and wide to go and get these court cases heard so that we can get them through, and therefore you will see an increase. Colleagues did some very up-to-date figures for me, and forgive me, this was prepared beforehand and should have been updated for you, but in quarter 2 we're on 90.9 for outcome, and quarter 3 we're showing 100%. So it's continuing to increase. We've mentioned our hate crime reporting, but we've separated that out. We expect to see some increase in reporting of hate crime when we look to go out into our community and encourage reporting. My colleague, Mr Warren, covers our domestic abuse services now, so I won't touch upon that. But did anyone have any questions for me with regards to ASB?
Yeah. Councillor Blake?
Thank you.
Can you go back one slide? There. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned about that 82.8. I don't look at it the way that's up there. The way I look at that, the reason why it says not satisfied with the outcomes is because they probably didn't get the result they wanted. And I think a true measure is actually that it's not the outcome, but it's the process that's been done right. I mean, you can do as much as you like. If you don't get, you're never going to get near 100% when you come to something like that, because it's just not going to, you didn't do it right. And yeah, it was done right. They're not going to be happy. But if you can say the process is right, if that was a target, then you should, then 100% is a lot better. But that 82.8 means absolutely nothing to me, because it's about outcomes, isn't it? About the process rather than that's what the above one says. That's why I'm quite happy with that. Yeah. To me, that doesn't even need to be in there. I know you put it in there, but to me it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant to me. It's about the outcome.
Yeah. And sorry, could you just remind us what the scale is against which the satisfaction is measured? Like,
Yes,
yeah, but is it like 9 or 10 out of 10? Is it a balance like at scale?
It is it is questions linked to level of satisfaction, i.e., were you satisfied with the way in which your case was handled, and were you satisfied with regards to the outcome? But
so yes or no?
Yes, yeah, and we are within the antisocial behaviour team. Any case in which they report that they've been dissatisfied in any way is independently reviewed by our principal officer, and where required, that is escalated to our antisocial behaviour and enforcement manager, Miss Brown. So in every case, and I would say, and Councillor Blake, you're absolutely right. What we're really looking at is if they're satisfied in the way in which we've handled their case as the borough. Where this indicator, it does prove useful, is sometimes where people are mentioning that court time and where that's caused them some distress, and that might highlight something for us as an authority, and we think, actually, we'll drive to Cambridge because that might save us a few weeks.
Councillor Brown, yeah.
Yeah, I think also what's really important, is that part that Julie's emphasising, that whenever they're not satisfied, it's not like, okay, we've only got 3% that aren't satisfied. There is then a whole process of finding out why, but finding out why and what that looks like. I think also there's a lot of managing of expectations. If it is about court cases and how long that's going to take, that communication, something that this has highlighted when they haven't been satisfied, and that's been highlighted as a reason why. We've moved more in the way in which we communicate that with them and how long this is going to take and what that looks like, so that our tenants, I think it is all about expectations, isn't it? So they fully understand what the process is, how long it will take and what we are doing. And that continuous communication with them is something that Julie and the team have really stepped up this last 12 months in order to get that like you say, the one above, were you satisfied with the way their landlord handled the case? That is what we've really focused on. And the communication with the tenant throughout the whole process.
Thank you.
I'll talk about the first item there, the allocations and lettings. We operate our allocations and lettings through our choice-based letting system, which operates a bidding cycle every week where every person with an active housing register application can place bids for the properties that they are eligible for, and we always seek to conclude that cycle as quickly as possible with people. The key thing I'll point out there is the temporary lettings part on the second line there. Because of the pressures on ours and most local authorities because of the cost of temporary accommodation, wherever possible we'll seek to place people into a temporary let that we can then make into a permanent letting for them, so that we reduce the cost and use of B&B, hotel and nightly let accommodation, but also to minimise the amount of moves that a person has to go through while they're moving through the homelessness process. So if we can, we'll place them into a property that we can then make permanent for them. If anyone has any questions on those before we move on to the other parts.
And if I cover the tenancy sustainment side of it, obviously the data shows that the team have got a strong and sustained commitment to upholding the tenancy standards, and they'll issue warnings and notices if they're needed, while also trying to support the tenants to maintain their tenancies. Some of the early intervention work that is included is mediation between the tenants, pet agreements, verbal warnings and tenancy breach interviews or visits. And the enforcement actions, which you'll see the figures at the bottom there, tenancy enforcement actions, they will involve like written warnings. They can be for untidy gardens or dumped rubbish that's affecting the community. There can be community protection warnings and notices with strict timescales for them to comply. If they don't comply, they can get some fixed penalty notice. But the team aim to avoid eviction wherever possible, and that's why obviously the evictions are low and the tenancy enforcement actions show that they work, because we don't want people to lose their homes, but they do need to maintain the tenancy agreement. When they sign up for a tenancy, they're given a lot of information and they're just interested really in getting their keys and getting in there, and it can be quite easily forgotten by them, which is one of the reasons the tenancy handbook is handy for them to be able to go back to. But also after 2 weeks, and it's been in place for a long time, is they get a contact from the voids team to check that everything's okay with the property. What I've introduced, which has started from the new year actually, is I've introduced a welcome meeting now. So with them, within 6 to 8 weeks of them starting their tenancy, the tenancy officer will actually, welcome them to their new home. They've had time to settle in, they've had their phone call if there's any issues with the property, and now the tenancy officer will then, introduce themselves, welcome to the tenancy, go over a few of those things again that was gone over at the sign up with the landlord and duty responsibilities. That's new, that started this week. And then in the hope that we've gone over that, then that helps them to understand what's expected of them as a tenant, and we can obviously, reduce the amount of enforcement actions that we have to do because they know, but also for them to understand what we're actually responsible to do for them as well, and identify any support. And that's the time when I aim to get the tenancy audit done at that time as well. So yeah, any questions? Thank you.
Councillor Blake?
It's not playing politics. It's something that when I was a cabinet member, I was very strong on. I'm very annoyed at one point when our team were going around collecting the rubbish, and quite often you'd see that a bin had been left out, shouldn't have been left out, and we knew who the person was and the tenant, and I kept on saying that is in breach of their tenancy agreement. And I said, how many times has that from the team that are doing it, deal with it, notify the housing? At that point, it was virtually that really it didn't happen. They didn't have the technology at that point. So I'm asking, the question is to you, is quite simply, because I could probably report 120 people in a month around where I live. Does that include, does that now still work? So what I'm saying is, just in very short words, if someone's in breach of their tenancy agreement for dumping their own rubbish, putting it out early, putting it out, is that now getting reported to the housing, and are they getting a notice of action that that's in breach of their tenancy agreement? I hope that is the case now.
Yeah, we're working very closely with the refuge team, and that does happen, and the tenancy officers will go out and the tenancy officers will go out and speak to them, and we'll issue any warnings, notices. Sometimes there's a reason why they're doing it, so we can, you know, get back to what they're, you know, sometimes because they're just not, you know, listening to what day the rubbish has got to be out. But sometimes there isn't other reasons, and we might need to provide a bit of support. But yeah, we are working really closely with the teams that are working really closely together. Yeah, oh yeah, they do feedback, yeah.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that the housing that Kirsty was working with James on before, and we felt until we took the action of ensuring that rubbish collection was weekly and making it easier for residents, that we weren't going to focus on that. Post-May, that is something now that has definitely been a measure. You know, enforcement has gone up in terms of that. You know, now we're making it easier for residents and tenants to do the right thing, and now there is far more liaison between James's team and what Kathy's team do, because we see that's important, that, you know, we have responsibilities within this borough, we all do, don't we? But we felt that we couldn't take that action until we had made weekly cycles back again, until we've made it easier for our tenants to do the right thing. Once we had done that, we are now having a stronger in terms of enforcement and action with our housing team, because now we feel that is more justified now that we are making it easier for our tenants to do the right thing.
Councillor Blake.
Oh dear, Adele. There was me trying to be so good tonight, and then that's absolute nonsense. You can let me. I never interrupted you. Do not interrupt me, please. Give me a bit of respect as I give you. Before we went to the fortnightly collection, we had the same problem when we was doing a weekly collection then, which is exactly the position you're in now. So there was no difference then. I tried to enforce it then. It was on its way then. It had nothing whatsoever to do with the fortnightly collection. It was an issue way before that, when there was a weekly collection, which we have now. So to try and bring politics into it is absolutely not. It's a bit below you, to be honest with you, Adele, tonight. To be honest, in a way, I think this has been a really good meeting, really positive. I've tried to control myself in the politics, and then you go around and spoil it by saying something like that.
What I was saying why we made the decision not to pursue that further that first year we were in administration, because we felt that we needed to do the other thing first before this then became a priority again. That is the point I am making.
Thank you both, and obviously appreciate people making efforts where they can to avoid bringing political elements into it. I understand that sometimes happens.
Yeah, we have the slide on mutual exchanges up there just to give some detail around the number of them that are carried out. It can be a very lengthy, complex process. It can sometimes involve 3, 4, 5 or more households being involved in a long chain of moves, all of which have to be looked at to make sure each one of those fits the requirements for mutual exchange. You can see there that there are a number there that we do refuse or cancel where someone seeks to move into a property which doesn't fit the requirements. So just to give some assurance that we do carry out all the due diligence throughout all stages of the process.
No, I mean, I kind of more an observation than the question, but it's good to see that this goes on. It is frustrating that more of it doesn't go on, but I understand the complications. Thank you.
Back to me. I think we've actually covered a fair amount of this with regards to our conversations concerning the TSMs, etc. But I'll give a very brief overview. But I hasten to add it's a brief overview. But if you want me to elaborate on anything, I or my colleagues here will try our very best to answer your questions. We had our new tenant and leaseholder strategy and policy approved by Cabinet in December. And the new strategy sets out a number of performance indicators. We have two new posts that we've recruited to within our team that have proven to be instrumental in developments in these areas. One is in which is our resident involvement coordinator, who is responsible for coordinating our resident involvement officers and our activities surrounding that. And we've also recruited a data and housing systems coordinator who is very much responsible for analysing complaints that we have within our housing service, and offering advice and guidance on how we can better our services going forward. We've mentioned our TSMs. Somebody already stole my thunder around that, which is disappointing. Yes, who did that? But yes, we have our TSMs being rolled out. We are, again, I'm saying it anyway because I had it written down. Yeah, absolutely. Ahead of our position where we were last year, and there's very much a coordinated plan around that so that it doesn't impact on our services. What we want to make sure that we're doing is that the impact across services is minimal with regards to going out and collecting this. You know, that putting additional pressure on our services, we very much want this to become business as usual within the organisation. And I think it was your good self, Councillor Baker, who mentioned us really pushing the point with regards to damp and mould, and I believe we have included with some additional questions within our TSMs which are around damp and mould. So again, it's us using that as an opportunity to highlight that very, very important issue and bringing that to the forefront of the tenant's mind. Branding, we're currently working with the comms team, and that is about developing a distinct landlord brand to use across our digital platforms, and this is about us being able to differentiate for our residents and tenants what is targeted directly towards the tenant and what would be a more general Basildon Borough Council resident post. So that just helps people being able to realise where the message is coming from and what's targeted to them. I think that's a lot of what is included in this has been covered amongst general discussions, but I'm very willing to answer any questions, of course, Chair, that anyone may have. Thank you.
Questions, guys? No.
Back to me again. So this is around general homelessness. If we can go to the chart there. One of the things I want to highlight there is around the households placed in bed and breakfast. We've taken a lot of action over the course of the last year to minimise the number of bed and breakfast placements through the use of acquisition of nightly let properties, which are of much better condition and suitability than the typical bed and breakfast accommodation. You can see there as well on the second line that we have made great inroads in reducing the number of people in bed and breakfast placements longer than 6 weeks, and we're now very happy to have that consistently at 0. It remains a high priority for us to continue to keep those numbers as low as possible, really, and that where people are in temporary accommodation, such as bed and breakfast, hotel or nightly let, that they're in there for as short a period as possible before we move them into other forms of accommodation in our pathways, such as our hostels and our own stock accommodation. You can see there that the number of people in the nightly lets has gone up, in line with the number of people in bed and breakfast has decreased, which is a trend that we are looking to continue as we move away from using bed and breakfasts. But unfortunately, the number of people in temporary accommodation is continuing to increase. This does sadly mirror the national position, as we see fewer opportunities for people to exit temporary accommodation because of the lack of suitable and affordable accommodation for people in the private rented sector.
Councillor Brotman, you had a question?
Apologies, I'm going to do it again. Okay. Number of households placed, number of families placed, number of households, number of households. Go on then, give me some figures about people that are single and on their own. Because all you keep caring about is households and families. There's people out there that live on their own.
A household can be a single person. A household can be a single person or a family of 10. We have a number of people that come through as singles, but with everyone that comes through, we have to apply the statutory thresholds, the main one being whether they have a priority need. There are obviously people that have children automatically fit that priority need criteria. If you're a single person, then we have to look at particular vulnerabilities. But yeah, we have a number of people that are single that we have a statutory duty towards that are in temporary accommodation.
as Kevin knows, I've been unwell over the last, well, as Elle knows as well, I've been unwell. But I've spent many nights with people that need homes. And if I was somebody who was on their own on the street, I would be quite offended to be called a household. I really would, or a family. And I think we need to make a description, a proper description of these people. Please.
That's just the definition that government uses. It's part of the statutory definition of it.
Councillor Blake?
That's a little bit of humour. You ever thought of becoming a politician? Because when you said consistently at zero, that chart doesn't say consistently at zero. It's 0, 0, 1, 0. See, it's sound just like a politician now.
Yeah. I'll take one in September as a win over the last 6 months.
Okay, you finished, Phil, or you? Yeah.
We have one on the next screen there. I've already covered a couple of those when we had the earlier slide. But yeah, just to say there, the numbers on the housing register also increasing month on month, as is to be expected, as people look to social housing as their main alternative, really, as their main option to seek affordable housing.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions just to close from the members on that presentation? Okay. Yeah. Councillor Roberts.
Is there any data to show how many people are taken off the street and taken into hospital because they're unwell through being on the street and not being looked after properly, or have we not got that data at all?
We wouldn't capture that. I suspect that that would be more for the Health Trust to capture. We do have obviously data on the number of rough sleepers that are out there on the streets, and we have weekly meetings with the hospitals on discharge huddles to make sure that we get safe discharges from hospitals, so we don't get people just placed into the Basildon Centre from a taxi. So we've done a lot of work over the last year to get better and safer discharges from hospital, to the extent where the NHS is now showing our meetings as best practice that they want to replicate across the rest of Essex.
Okay, lovely. So I think the only item left on the agenda now then is the work programme moving forward. Obviously we've had this for a while, so I'll take it as read, but just to check with the members, any other additional items that we'd like to add? Oh, sorry, shall I wait? Resume. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so any further agenda items members would like to add for our forthcoming meetings? No? Okay, in that case, I think... Oh, sorry, Councillor Brockman.
Yeah, can you put on the paperwork, will everyone please put the microphones closer to their mouth so the deaf can hear them?
Or have
Accessibility is vital.
or have a big mouth.
It's a very important matter, this hearing.
Okay, on that note, thank you very much, officers and members, for your contribution tonight, and safe journey home in the rain, by the sound of things.
You've got a cold?
Yeah, cough more than anything, yeah.
It's age, isn't it?